up, so while we're waiting for it to unfreeze, I'll take a second.
It's just nice. It's nice when you walk in. It's like, I know this guy.
Okay.
It's nice. It's very nice.
So I'll say outside first the story, and you can follow the Gemara. We're going to start with the Gemara Menachos first. This is a story that is, I don't know if the word tragic, it's definitely interesting, which is the story of the house of Chonyo. We'll see, we're going to look in the Gemara and learn the story, and we're going to look in the Rambam, who has an Apirish Mishnah that tells the story. And this has, obviously, it's based on a Mishnah, so it has a halachic ramifications and points. So, what's going on? It's interesting. This only happens when I come here with this computer. I'm not sure. No, it's not a signal thing. It's just something that maybe too many programs. Oh, here we go. So, the Gemara is talking about. Come on, let's just keep it in. Okay. Just give me a second, guys. Okay, let's bring up the text. It's Gemara Menachos. Okay. It's a Mishnah. The Mishnah is going to be like this. Okay. No. The first one. You'll see the first one that says Menachos.
No.
You don't see Menachos?
No.
There should be two. Here, let me see your phone a second. Well, you have to go back to the link. Go back to the link, to the message on YouTube, and you see this. Here, give me your page. Give me your computer. You see the question that says Menachos? No. Here we go. I'm going to turn this off. Where do you get the text from? All right. So we're going to go over here to Menachos.
Okay.
Okay. There you go. Scroll down. There's going to be two Mishnahs. The second Mishnah is, they're both actually talking about the same laws. These are the laws that deal with a person who is trying to make a donation or to serve, different questions of serving or donations to the temple. What are your obligations? So the second Mishnah is like this. There's probably in the Mishnah, it's one Mishnah. So the Mishnah says like this. You have a priest, and we're going to assume, obviously, we're not talking about a priest. We have to talk about a halachic priest, meaning to say someone who's a descendant of Aaron, who served in the house of Chonyo. Lo yishamish b'migdash b'Yerushalayim. He can't serve afterwards in the Temple of Jerusalem. Even more so, if the Kohen once served in a house of idol worship. Okay, so we know that there's a place called the house of Chonyo, and if you served in that house, then you can't later serve in the.
Must be a house of worship.
Some sort of house of worship. And even surely, if you served in a house of idol worship, you can't serve in the temple. Shenemar, what's the proof? What's the verse to support this law? Is Akla Yalu Koine Habamais. You found the Mishnah? The Akla Yalu Koine Habamais Al Mizbeach Hashem b'Yerushalayim. The Koine Habamais, the priests of the Bamais that were of altars that are not altars of halacha, meaning to say they were altars of either Chonyo's house or of Avodah Zarah. They can't serve Mizbeach Hashem b'Yerushalayim. They can't serve in the house of God in Jerusalem. They could repent and they could eat they could still have the tithings and other things, but they can't serve. There is, as if they have a blemish, and a blemish, a Kohen has a blemish, can't serve. They divide the gifts, 24 gifts to the Kohen, but they cannot serve in the temple. Okay, so we're going to go down. You still have it?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go down. We're not going to learn the first piece of the Gemara. We just want to see the Mishnah. We're going to actually, I think we have to go all the way to the next page. So push the next page on top. And we're going to bring this Gemara, the Gemara that tells us the story of Chonyo. If you scroll down, it's middle of the page. It's okay. The Ein Tzarech Leimer, it starts off, the Mishnah teaches, and needless to say, if a priest served for something else. Okay. So the Gemara says like this: Midika Omar Ein Tzarech Leimer Davachem Miklal Debeis Chonyo Lo Avodah Zarahu. The fact that the Mishnah makes it differentiates between someone who served in the house of Chonyo or someone who served in a house of idol worship it means to say that the house of Chonyo was not a house of idol worship, whatever this mystery house was. So who is this opinion? Tanya Kamanda Amr, who's our Mishnah hold that the house of Chonyo is not a house of Avodah Zarah? Base Chonyo Vlava by the Zarah. Who the Tanya? Because we have a brisa. Okay, now we go to the story. What is this house of Chonyo? It's a fascinating story. That story, the Gemara learns a lot of lessons from it. We'll bring down the Rambam. There's a lot of machlekes about the story. Till this day, it's not really a settled issue. The Rebbe spoke about the house of Chonyo, I think in 1992. The Rebbe, when he talked about Mashiach, and he talked about things that are going to come back in history, the Rebbe mentioned the house of Chonyo as well. Okay. Tanya, what's the Mishnah?
What's the name you say?
Chonyo. Ches Vav Nun Yud Aleph. In English, he was called Onias, the house of Onias. Okay. We'll learn who he was. The Tanya, we learn a brisa. Aisa Shana Shemei Shimon HaTzadik. The year that Shimon the righteous passed away. Now, according to the Rambam and the Mishnah, the original text that we have, there's a few things different than if you're going to search the story online. For instance, the Josephus, for some reason, does not put in the dates the way we have it. But either way, we don't. Rabbi Steinzal says there were two high priests with the name Shimon the righteous. We all know there's a street in Yerushalayim not too far from here called Shimon HaTzadik Street, which is not far from where Shimon HaTzadik is buried. He's buried in what's the area called? So what's the area called? The Arab area called Sheikh Jahar. Sheikh Jahar, yeah. So Sheikh Jahar is where Shimon HaTzadik is buried. We're most likely referring to this Shimon HaTzadik. What happened? The year that Shimon HaTzadik passed away. Now, who was Shimon HaTzadik? We learned about him. Where does everyone know where Shimon HaTzadik first appears in our literature, in our text? Pirkei Avot, of course. You open up the first chapter of Pirkei Avot. We open up the first chapter of Pirkei Avot, and we open up the first Mishnah, and we learn about the Masorah of Torah, and we find out that Shimon HaTzadik was the last of the members of the Great Assembly. Meaning to say, like we've learned about the members of the Great Assembly, the great members of the Great Assembly were with the body of Torah that dealt with the Jewish people the 70 years of the exile. All the big names of the people that were in exile, the prophets, Mordechai, Ezra, Nehemiah, all these people sat on the members of the Great Assembly. From the latest of the great members of the Great Assembly is Shimon the righteous. So Shimon HaTzadik ends up becoming the high priest in the Second Temple. He's the one that confronts Alexander the Great when he comes to conquer Eretz Yisrael. It's Shimon HaTzadik. He's the one, the famous story. He sees the image of Shimon HaTzadik. He kept the tempo of the Beis Hamikdash at a higher level until his passing. Once Shimon HaTzadik passes away, we learn later in the Gemara, a lot of things changed. A lot of things that were a given in the temple. For instance, we all know that on Yom Kippur, we push the Sarah Azazel, the goat that gets thrown down the mountain. So that goat has a string that's connected to its fate. If the rope turns, ribbon turns white, that means that the Jewish people were forgiven. That didn't always happen until after the days of Shimon HaTzadik. There are certain things that didn't happen after the days of Shimon HaTzadik. All right, they didn't bless the high priest didn't bless using God's name. All right, the Tanya. When Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous passes away, he told his people, whoever was there, that I'm going to die this year. How do you know? How do you know you're going to die? So he says, he says to them, Kol Yom HaKippurim, whenever on Yom Kippur I go into the Holy of Holies, is Nizdamin Lizokin Echad Lovish Levanim. Always someone accompanies me that comes in with me dressed in white. V'nisativ Levanim, and he's cloaked in white. V'nichnas imi v'yatza. He goes in with me and he comes out with me. So obviously the question is, who is this person that goes in with Shimon the righteous? It says, B'chol Adam La'yeh. There's a clear verse in the Torah that says, no one's allowed to go in with the high priest. So how does it say that the high priest had this person that goes into him? It says, even the angels can't go in. So who's going in? So the answer is the Shekhinah went in with him. The divine presence went in with Shimon the righteous into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That's one of the opinions brought down. So this year, this old person was not in white, he was in black. He goes in with me, but he doesn't come out with me. And that he understood that that was a sign, and he took that sign to mean that he's not going to live the year. In 1987, there's a video of this. I remember the story when I was still around. It's the Rabbi used to give out Erev Sukkos. The Rabbi would give out Arba Minim. Means for certain, not everyone, but certain select individuals, Rabbanim, people of Askanim, people of let's say the more important people, the Rebbe would gift them some of the four from the four minim. Either he'd give a hadas, a esrig, or a lulav. The Rebbe gave out from the four minim. I remember Rabbi Deitch used to do that in the old city. He would give out the hadasim back in the day. So there was a chassid. He was known as Zusha the Partisan because he was a partisan. And when that 1987 or end of 86, going into 87, Tavshim Zayin, he comes by the Rebbe. You see in the video, the Rebbe would always bless whoever came by. He would give them a blessing because it's around the new year, right? And he'd say, you should live out the year. That was part of the blessing he would give when he gave the Arba Minim, when he gave someone. This chassid comes by, he was very close to the Rebbe. The Rebbe looks at him, he gives him a hadas and turns his face away. Right. Doesn't say anything to him. Now, he was a partisan, so he's a partisan, he's a soldier. Soldier doesn't, like Shimon HaTzadik knew, Zusha the partisan knew. I thought the story was the first night Yom Tov. I heard later it was the second night Yom Tov. He danced the whole night, Simchas Beis HaShoeva. He went into the sukkah and passed away. The partisan doesn't waste time. He doesn't get the blessing. He knows that it's time for him to go, and he passed away within a few days. Okay. So the Tosfos says, Nizdam li zaken echad, lavish levanim v'yushami parach v'chol adam la'iyeh ba'ayom ma'id afilu malachim. Tosfos says that no one's allowed to go with the high priest, even the angels. So he answers, Mashani the Shem Shechina Haisis. So the Gemara answers that it was the Shechina that went in with Shimon HaTzadik. So when the Shechina went in the dress of, in the clothing, so to say, of white, Shimon HaTzadik felt that he was safe. When he came in the last time he went in with him black and didn't leave with him, he knew it was a sign. What happens? So like Zusha the partisan, Shimon HaTzadik doesn't waste any time. He got sick immediately after the holiday, meaning after Sukkot, he got sick. And after 7 days, everyone knows that his Yortzeit is right after Sukkot, so Mace, and he passed away. And the Gemara continues and says, after that, there's a difference of opinion what this means, but after that, the tradition is that the students of the high priest or the priest themselves no longer did the Birchat Kohanim or the services mentioning the name of the Lord Yud Kei Vav Kei properly. They'd said Adonai like we do it today. So from then time again, things stopped with Shimon HaTzadik. The Gemara tells us right away, this is what happened. They stopped saying the name of Hashem in the Brachas Kohanim. Now, B'shas B'tirasei, we're going to get back to some of the footnotes, but let's just get to the story. B'shas B'tirasei, he's about to pass away. He's sick for 7 days, and he knows he's going to pass away. So he tells his students, or he tells the committee, Chonyo b'ni shamash tachtay. My son Chonyo should be the high priest after me. Now, it's not clear if Chonyo was definitely the younger son. So Niskana by Shimi Achiv, his brother Shimi was jealous. Why does Chonyo get to be high priest? He had he had a brother. So he had a brother Shimi. So the brother Shimi is jealous. Why does Chonyo get that appointment of the high priest? He was 2.5 years older than him. So Shimi's 2.5 years older than Chonyo. His father gives over this position of obvious importance to his son Chonyo, which is younger, and Shimi's jealous. So Shimi tells Chonyo as following. So in a conniving way, I'm going to teach you what it means to be a high priest. Let me teach you how to be a high priest. This is a very weird story because basically, you can't just get the job of high priest without being prepared, without knowing the laws, without his father was the high priest for 40 years. He had to be a sgan first. He had to be an assistant. It couldn't be that he doesn't know anything. It's not like he was coming wet behind the ears, but how does he when the commentaries ask this question, how could it be that he didn't know? But he comes and he says, let me teach you how to do this service. So what does he do? Now everyone knows, this is obvious, that for a high priest to do service, what does he need? He has to wear the Shemona Begadim. He has to wear the clothing of the high priest, which is the 8 garments of the high priest. What does he do? He dresses him in unkali v'chagore b'tzilzul. What does he dress him in? In a tunic and girded him with a ribbon. Basically, he put him on ladies' clothes. as the high priest to get him ready to serve the service. And he sets him next to the altar. So this is what Shimi does to Chani. The Shimi is the older brother, does his younger brother, who Shimon the righteous points that Chani should be the high priest. Then he goes and runs and tells his fellow Kohanim. Now we learned already last week in our class about the zealots that the Kohanim were zealots, meaning to say,
put that on,
which means the Kohanim, like we learned last week, the Kohanim, if someone served impure, they didn't even take him to court. They beat him up and smashed his head in outside. So the Kohanim were very aggressive in the temple. So he goes and he tells the Kohanim, look what this guy did and fulfilled to his lover. There's a difference of opinion. Some people learned that he meant his wife. Others means he said he had a lover. And what did he do? That he basically, what did he tell her? That you want to know how much I'm devoted to our relationship. That the day that I become high priest, I'm going to dress myself in your clothing. I'm going to wear your scarf. I'm going to wear your ribbon. And that's going to be my sign to show that I really love you. I'm going to wear it on my first day of service. So basically, you can imagine the Kohanim hearing that. That was, if they're going to beat up someone for serving impure, this is going to take the Kohanim right over the top, which what his plan was. His plan was for the Kohanim to kill Honey, to kill Honey, and he wanted the job. So Rashi says, "Lahavuse liishta." Rashi's kind. Others don't say it was his wife. Others say it was his lover. But Rashi says it was his wife. So he says, the Tosfos actually asked. Tosfos asked, how is it that here the father has two sons? So why would the father have appointed the son that seemingly knew nothing? Shimi's the older son. He seemingly knew more, and Yechani knew less. Doesn't even know how to do the service. A yeshiva child would know. A kid from Talmud Torah would know you don't dress like that by the mizbeach. You don't have to be. You don't have to be such a smart. And then Shimon the HaTzadik points him to be high priest. So Tosfos asked the question. So he says like this, and also he would have had to have had Shimon. He would have to have served his father. He would have had to have been this guy. You can't just get the job as high priest. So he says, that, which is actually interesting in the story, and according to this version of the story has two versions. This version of the story is that what do we see so far from the story? We see one thing is that Chani is a little naive, and we see Shimi was a horrible person, right? He's setting up his brother to be killed, to be murdered, because he didn't get the position. Shimon HaTzadik evidently, Tosfos says, knew that. He knew that Shimi may have been the more capable as far as the law goes, but he didn't deserve the job. In God-fearing, Chani was better, even though he was younger. So he appointed Chani to be high priest, not to take the one that was maybe qualified technically. Okay, so the Gemara continues. So what does he do? So the brothers, again, the Kohanim get riled up, and it's not hard for them to get riled up, and they want to kill Chani for wearing his wife's clothing. So he runs away and they chase him. So he ran to Alexandria of Egypt. And he built an altar, like a temple. And he started to worship idols. What do we see from here? We see psychologically the story is a very deep, because in this version of the story, Chani is the qualified one in Yerushalayim. Shimon HaTzadik recognized in the son that he was God-fearing. Shimi was not. But he was so distraught of what happened in the story that he runs away and he builds a Avodah Zarah. Because it's almost like a person Chani does. Chani runs. They want to kill him because he's wearing his wife's clothing. He didn't know. He ran away. He decided to chase him. He took off. He bounced. He went to Egypt. And then he goes and he builds a house for Avodah Zarah. But what do we see from this? That even though he initially was a God-fearing person, he was crushed. He was spiritually crushed, and he went and built a place for Avodah Zarah. When the rabbis heard what happened, so this is all the opinions of Rabbi. What did the rabbis say?
just curious.
Go ahead.
You're sort of laughing while you're teaching. That's like something's giving you a kick out of it.
No, I'll tell you I'll tell you what the problem is that the story comes back in history many times, where there's unfortunate things that happen in someone's life that trigger a person to go off the derech when I mean he didn't do anything. He didn't start off doing anything wrong. He was just trying. His brother set him up. He totally lost faith in the system, and he opened up a house of Avodah Zarah. And the rabbis checked on that. The rabbi said that if this person Shimi, who did not enter the position of high priest, acted such a jealous way, all the more so one who enters. The rabbi said, look at Shimi. He wasn't even in the job yet, and he just wanted the job, and he was so envious of his younger brother that he would set him up in such a horrible way. And look at the outcome what it sent to what happened to his brother. This is the opinion of Rameir. So basically, our Mishnah doesn't go according to Rameir. Why not? Because our Mishnah says that Chonyo house was not a house of Avodah Zarah. Because it says you can't, if you're coincident in the house of Chani or in the house of Avodah Zarah. According to this, Chani was a house of Avodah Zarah. So our Mishnah doesn't go according to Rameir. Just to go back a bit, if Shane does, and give us a little bit of context of the story. Again, later, this house stood. The question is when Shimon HaTzadik was high priest. Which Shimon HaTzadik is? Rav Steinberg says it could have been the first Shimon HaTzadik or the grandson of Shimon HaTzadik. The problem is how long did it stand? This also was brought down in Ben Sira. It definitely stood after the house of the Beis Hamikdash. Means it stood for a few hundred years in Alexandria. Now we have it. The Gemara says Alexandria of Egypt. He went to Alexandria, but if you go online, it's going to say another city. I forget the name of the city. It's not exactly Alexandria of Egypt. Maybe they just meant in the general area. Okay. So that's the opinion of Rameir. What is the next opinion, which would have to be our Mishnah? Amar Lai Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda, his colleague, says to Rameir, no. Lo kachai ma'aseh. This isn't the story. The story is opposite. The beginning of the story is correct. Shimon HaTzadik sees the white, sees the black. He knows that he's not going to make it the next year. He tells his students or those around him that Chani has to be the high priest, and he's younger. But Chani doesn't take the job. Why doesn't Chani take the job? Because Chani feels bad for his older brother, right? By the way, Moshe Rabbeinu also. What does Rashi say? Rashi says that Moshe Rabbeinu stood 7 days by the mountain. Why did he argue with God for 7 days? One of the reasons Rashi says he felt bad for Aaron. Aaron's his older brother, and Moshe's younger. He's younger by also 3 years, right? Moshe was 80 and he was 83. So Moshe didn't feel comfortable taking the job of the leader, which is what the high priest was in those days, over his older brother. So Chani also decided he's not going to take the job. It's not right that he should take the job and be the high priest. So because Shimi was older than him. So he figured that it's not right for him to take the position. He yielded his father's will, and he gave it to Shimi. Nevertheless, what happened was he regretted it. So in this case, according to Rabbi Yehuda, everything changes. Chani is more qualified, but he's also a jealous person. So he's the jealous person, not Shimi. Shimi doesn't say anywhere that Shimi was jealous. Shimi was naive. He's an older brother who's passed over. Chani, initially, is the confused person, right? He struggles with himself. He's like the Cain of his times. So he has a struggle, and he says to Shimi, "You become the high priest," and he regrets, and he's jealous now of his older brother. Why did he yield his older brother? So Chani tells Shimi, "I'm going to teach you how to be high priest." Again, now based on this, we would understand that in this reason now, according to the first answer, according to Rameir, why did Reb Shimon HaTzadik appoint Chani? Because he had Yer Shemayim. But here, he appointed Chani because he was more learned than him. He was more learned than his older brother. So he says, I'm going to come and teach you how to be high priest. Same thing. He'll be shy, the unkli, he dresses them up in his wife's or his lover's garments and stands his older brother by the Mizbeach. And again, Chani now, according to this version of the story, according to Rabbi, goes to his fellow high priest. Look what this guy did. And when he made a vow to his lover, the day that I become high priest, I'm going to dress in your clothing, wear your scarf or your ribbon, and that's going to be a sign of my love for you. Okay. So here, Rashi says in this version, Hani was smarter than Shimi. He was a younger brother who was smarter. So what happens? So the same thing, of course. The Kohanim spring to action. Oh, someone such a desecration and abomination on the temple. So they go and they want to kill now Shimi, not Chani. They want to kill Shimi because Chani dressed them up in these clothing. So he tells them, "What do you want from me? It's not my fault." He told them what happened. He told them that he was set up. So now the priests are really upset. Evidently, they believed Shimi, and maybe Shimi was more God-fearing. They decide they're going to go kill Chani. They chased him. Here it says Ratz the Beis HaMelech. I don't know what king that was. I don't think it was the king of the Jewish people then. Maybe he went to the governor's house because there was maybe a governor from the Persians or the Greeks. But he runs to the palace, whatever that palace may be. But Ratzu Akrav, and they chased him to the palace. They're not overwhelmed by the palace. And they kept on pointing him out. Here, look at this. This is the guy who set up his brother. So he got embarrassed. And Alexandria, he went to Alexandria, Sham Mitzrayim, Ubana Sham, Mizbeach Behela L'Shem Shemayim. And here he builds a temple, but he builds a temple for God. So the story actually, if you take both opinions in its full, it's actually interesting. According to Meir, Hani is the one who's taken advantage of by his older brother Shimi, and he doesn't tell the Kohanim what happens. He runs away and he builds a house for Avodah Zarah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Hani is the one who's really bad. He yields initially to his older brother, gives him the job, teaches him tells him to dress up in his wife's clothing. Then when they find out what happens, he runs away, but he still has sincerity, and he's not the one who's crushed because he's the one who did all the negative. He does evidently some sort of tshuva, and he builds a house for Hashem. Now the question is, and we're going to learn Megillah for a second. It's not so simple. How can he build a house for Hashem? What's the first violation? The first violation is you're not allowed to sacrifice outside the temple. You're not allowed to sacrifice outside of Eretz Yisrael. Now, you have every year we read over here in the news about someone who's grabbed a goat and wants to run to the Mizbeach. It's not so simple. I'm not an expert in the law, they're not going to pretend to me. But that's definitely the question. How is he allowed to sacrifice? So there's a different opinion. Some opinions hold that they did it for God, but they were Ochayv Chorus. And that's why they're not allowed to serve in the that's why they're not allowed to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, because they sacrificed sacrifices outside the Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, that disqualified them to later become, if they did tshuva or if they left Alexandria, they came up to Eretz Yisrael, that they no longer were able to serve.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, was it just chutzpah
that they opened the second temple?
that they did open sacrifices? I mean, they obviously knew. Everybody knew that you're not allowed to go outside the courtyard or however it is how it was laid out. I mean, was this the chutzpah thing?
It's a very good question. I think one of the things that the Jewish people suffered from for a long time, evidently it still in some way was in the second temple, but the first temple we definitely suffered from it, was the bamis, the private altars. Every time you open up the Navi, the prophets, you say, this king was an amazing king, but he couldn't get rid of the private altars. What were the private altars that they're talking about? These are not Avodah Zarah. The law was that up until Yerushalayim, you were able to have a small altar. You had, let's say, your backyard. You had how you made that altar was maybe different. It wasn't many stones. It was one stone, but whatever, right? Shimshon's father sacrificed outside his house. That's Manoach. He made a sacrifice, and the angel goes up in the smoke. There was a concept up until the first temple of Bamis. Once they had Shiloh, there's questions if during Shiloh, then after Shiloh went down, Givon and no, there's different halachic questions about when halachically these small altars were allowed. But these small altars were allowed, and the Jewish people could never get rid of them. They built a temple, and it was forbidden for them to do it. They did it anyways. So you're asking a good question, but that's something they suffered from. Why? So what's the psychology of it? It's the same thing you see a lot of times still today. People will do spiritual things, but it's not according to Allah.
Something sexual about it.
Why?
I don't know. I mean, like altar in your backyard, something is peculiar.
No, the concept existed. It was forbidden after they built a temple, but they couldn't stop doing it.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. It's
Yes.
something sexy going on.
I don't know if it's that. I think it's like a person.
Oh, now you're up.
No, I think
The whole time I was just waiting for the punchline. Waiting for the key word on the show.
The key word is
Rabbi, what do you think, Rosh Yeshiva? What do you think the reason is the Jewish people couldn't stop doing the bumbles?
They could much.
They couldn't stop having their own private altars, even though it was forbidden. I mean, if you're building an altar for God, and so why would you build an altar that's forbidden?
Was it forbidden Deraisa or Rabbanim?
No, it's a Torah. You're not allowed to.
No, but I'm saying they said up before them, they said basically
Yeah, but then once they built it, it was forbidden.
So it was something.
There's a pasuk there, but that the pasuk is based on. It's okay. It's machlekes. The Megillah, we find out if it's a machlekes or not. But once they say Asher Yivchar Hashem, the Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem, then you're not allowed. That's the chosen place. That's called Beit HaBechira. God chose only this place to be the temple, no place else. Okay. So they build this. He builds an altar for God. Now, according to some opinions, he doesn't build an altar for Jews, only for Gentiles, which is very interesting. He built a house of worship for Gentiles. No Jew was ever, they didn't sacrifice Jewish sacrifice. It was a place of sacrifice only for Gentile, and it's allowed.
what? It's pantheism or something?
No. It was for God, but it was for the seven Noahide laws. It was the seven Noahide. He built the. I mean, so they built a Beit HaMikdash for the Noahide, for the people that wanted to, Gentiles that wanted to serve Hashem. Oh, so the question is, if that should be allowed, so why couldn't they serve in the Beit HaMikdash? So it's what some of the answers. The answer is that they still shouldn't have done it. I mean, it's not as forbidden. There's no avodah zarah. It's not really like you're doing because to sacrifice outside the temple is punishable by death. Correct. Of course, it's the right. It's biblical. So why would they if they're doing it for the Gentiles then it's okay. So why are they punished? Why can't they serve in the temple? So the answer is because they still shouldn't have done it.
You said it's possible that they couldn't make outside of it. See, that they came down during the time of Mishnah.
No, the pasuk is in the Torah, but it implies it kicked in once the Beis HaMikdash was set up.
So they say it's retroactively.
Yes.
Okay.
Now the thing is that
Maybe they repeated that.
no, that's not. There's an idea. Why did the high priest in the second temple serve in the second temple, even though they knew they wouldn't live out the year? Why would they want to go into the Holy of Holies? Why did people pay money to the Romans even if they weren't priests? Why would you do that?
Maybe speak to God.
What? Yeah, because that's the thing. People want to do things. They're ready to sacrifice their life for spirituality, even if it's not according to Torah. It says there's a certain angel called the Seraphim. You know what the Seraphim are? The Seraphim angels are the ones that burn out. They get so excited for Hashem, they burn out. So there's people like that. They burn out, even if they're doing what they shouldn't be doing, they're serving Hashem. Okay, there's a lot to think about this. The question's a good one. The answer is not so good.
Like the guy who studied Kabbalah and died early, type of thing?
There's a lot of people, or another Vinaviyu. Another Vinaviyu did a sacrifice they shouldn't be doing. King Uziyahu did something he shouldn't do. He was stricken with leprosy.
Yeah.
People do things that overstep a boundary, and they're not bad people. Look, Chani himself ended up building a house for God, Gentiles, whatever, however, but it was a holy house. And I can tell you, and later there's a Mishnah that we're going to learn in a second if we have time. A Mishnah in Megillah that says that in theory today, if Chani's house was standing today, there's an opinion, maybe a minority opinion, we'd be able to sacrifice there today.
Really?
Because the restriction of Yerushalayim was nullified with the destruction of the temple. That means not only the whole, and it's a very hard question.
So I hear what you're saying. So you're saying that the dispute with Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda.
No, because Rabbi and Yehuda agree that this happened in the second temple. Everyone agrees they couldn't build a house for God in Alexandria. But according to the opinion, it says that they built it for the Gentiles. Again, the Romans destroyed that house. It was supposed to be a replica. I mean, the Mishnah before, we didn't read this Mishnah. The Mishnah before said that they had vessels that were replicas to the vessels in the temple. Chani was obviously, according to Rabbi Yehuda at least, it was an opinion that he was a knowledgeable person. He was a chacham. He knew how to build a temple. I mean, building a temple is not so simple. He built a temple that was a replica of the temple of Yerushalayim. He did sacrifice. He did the service. He had the kelim. According to one opinion, not everyone agrees to that.
Rabbi Yehuda?
Even Rabbi Yehuda, in Rabbi Yehuda, most opinions say that he served for Hashem, and although they were serving God, but they were doing an Isser Kares by serving outside of the base of Mikdash, or outside of Eretz Yisrael even. And the one opinion is that he did it for Gentiles that would get rid of the problem. And there's a pasuk that talks about this. It says there's a pasuk that says, "V'haya b'yem hu," there will be that day that Yiyah Mizbeach Lashem Mitoch Eretz Mitzrayim. Imagine this. Yeshaya Navi says that one day there's going to be a house for God in the land of Egypt. And there'll be a pillar at its border to the Lord, and that's a sign that they were going to build it for God in Mitzrayim, and that's what he did. Chani ran away and built a house for Hashem in Alexandria of Egypt.
So I just want to be clear. So Rabbi Yehuda says he built the temple he built his altar to Mishbeach during the time of second. Everyone agrees second temple times when it was built.
Yes, Shimon HaTzadik definitely lives in the second temple.
So Rabbi Meir says it was a Avodah.
Yeah, it was a house. Okay, Meir turns. I think if you want to go deeper into the story, you have to take all the parts together. It means they argue not about just what kind of house it was. They also argue about what the story was, and I think it's because they go hand in hand. How the story was is how the story ended. Meaning, according to Meir, Chani was appointed high priest.
Yeah.
Shimi was jealous, his older brother. Yeah. He sets them up.
He
runs away and then builds a house for Avodah Zarah. That's Rabbi Meir.
Yeah.
According to Rabbi Yehuda, Chani yields to Shimi because he's his oldest brother. Teaches him how to be high priest by dressing. He teaches him how to be high priest by dressing him up in his, let's say Rashi, his others, whatever, in a woman's clothing.
How would he teach him how to? That sounds like the good guy setting up his brother.
He was. So that means that's what I'm saying. You take all the parts of the story and put them and bundle them together. The beginning and end of the story means how Rameir sees the story and how Yehuda sees the story. It's not just an argument, a whole bunch of details. The beginning and end of the story it's all one story. It means Rameir says Chani started off good. He didn't do anything wrong. He was set up by his older brother, runs away and builds a house for idols. Again, why? There's a disillusion there, right? He was set up. He was upset. So what does he do? He leaves God. He goes and builds a house for Avodah Zarah. That's happened before in history. It's happened many times. A person feels that they were wronged by the system, and Asa or others. Yeah. And then you have Asa is the far example. There's more examples recently. Then you have Rabbi Yehuda says that Chani actually started off good. He yields to his older brother, gets jealous, struggles with himself, sets him up, runs away because the Kohanim want to kill him for setting up his brother, and then builds a house for God because he does tshuva, because he was the one who's
the one story
he's not the
victim, the other story he's the aggressor.
Exactly. But when he's the aggressor, he builds a house for Hashem. When he's the victim, he builds a house for Avodah Zarah.
Which doesn't make sense.
No, it does make sense. It's the victim, because that's the psychology of the victim. The victim, instead of taking it, that's the story here.
So I'm not sure. I don't understand this problem. It sounds like this story dovetails into your story about forgiveness.
No, this whole shit is like it's totally connected.
Yeah,
the brothers falling out.
There was a kid. You may not know this kid. Lovely boy. His name was Meir Shlomo. We called him Amos.
Played the guitar?
No.
I knew the name.
From Canada. It's a young guy. And he used to come to my house once a week while he was learning with Rabbi. He was part of that. And then he got married and then he took he's like the head of the Cheder in Brooklyn.
And
I think he's a Kaim also.
And
when you were talking about like this, I thought it was a place of Avodah Zarah. It's a house for Goyim to worship Hashem.
According to one opinion.
And he used to say, this guy, but I never.
It's posters. We'll see in a second.
I haven't heard of anybody back it up. But he used to say that the Rebbe, he was probably the smartest kid. Ask Akivah. He's the smartest kid we ever met in our lives.
Okay.
And he said that the Rebbe insisted that there be as many Noahide law houses as Chabad houses.
Wow.
And we have a lot of work ahead of us.
And that was when he said it was
Yeah.
already 10 plus years ago. Did you ever hear that before?
I didn't hear that specific thing, but if he said it, I mean, but that, yeah. I mean, so Chani was ahead of his time. He built a house for the Noah. That's what he says over here. Tosa says, how could he have done it, set up a house for God? If for Avodah Zarah, okay, it's Avodah Zarah, what could he do? But if he set up a house for God, how could he do it in Egypt? It's slaughtering a korban outside of the temple. The Tosa says, he did it for the Noahites. There's a word the words Chacham has to be taken out. They gave vows to God. So he set up kind of what do they call it?
Outreach center or something?
Yeah, like a base of English for the. Okay.
Very quickly, one thing, Eliyahu, Raphael, then Saada. The starting Rav of the old city fell down the stairs in the 4 synagogues and seriously in trouble in hospital. What? His name is Raphael? No, he added the Raphael name. The first name is Eliyahu. He added the name of Paul for and Shari said it right now in critical condition.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
When does this happen today? Today?
No, 2 days ago. He fell down the stairs, those work stairs, and right by my house. Go down.
Very.
Double. The 4 synagogues.
I know.
My side.
Very steep.
What?
Very steep and slippery.
Oh, terrible. They go down really quick, all the way down. He fell down the whole thing. Landed on his head. Oh, and he's in critical condition. He was unconscious when they got him. He lay there for an hour and a half. Nobody showed up in shul. For an hour and a half, he lay there bleeding on the floor. Again, Eliyahu, Raphael, and Saada, Saada. What? You have to put your phone on mute. Maybe you can't hear it. What do I do?
Take me the phone.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just
An open window.
let's just do these 2 footnotes for Rabbi Steinsaltz, then we're going to see another Mishnah. Okay, he says this. Since there are many cities in Asia and Africa that were called Alexandria, the sages specified that this refers to Alexandria of Egypt. Again, if you go online, it's going to say it's not in Alexandria. There was a large and important Jewish community in Alexandria for many generations, and a central synagogue was famous for its size. Everyone knows that the shul in Alexandria was so large that when they did Amen, they had flags. You imagine those days. That was a huge. It was a
huge
show. So much so it took them a whole Shimon Esrei for the Kohanim to get to the place of the Jidduchin. Many of the great sages visited there and discussed issues that arose in the connection.
The alternative place other than Alexandria, did they say it's because it was Alexandria or was another place?
Where for the house of Chonyo? There's a name. If you Google it, you'll see the house of Onias. It says I forget the name. It's a place where people worship the sun. So I'm not sure if they have excavations that prove that it was from there, but the Gemara says it was in Alexandria. Rabbi Steinsaltz would have mentioned it if he thought that was relevant. He says this community was apparently destroyed in a harsh in the harsh crushing of the Jewish rebellions in the year 66 and 115 CE. So I think that must have been when that temple was destroyed. That would be 30 years, or second temple. That would be 30 years. That'd be 72 is the Churban Bayis, and this is 15. So then it would be after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so I just want to do one more footnote, then we'll go just finish off this Gemara. Tosfos writes that Chonyo sacrificed the offerings on behalf of the Gentiles, who are not subject to the prohibition against slaughtering offerings outside the temple. It means a Gentile, halachically, could build a Mizbeach for God in Alexandria.
They need a Jew to still perform the Shita.
So that's what he was doing. They were doing it on their behalf. The Rambam's commentary in the Mishnah says those who served in the temple of Chonyo transgressed the prohibition against slaughtering offerings outside the temple. So the Rambam disagrees with Tosfos and says they had a temple, they served for God, but they were transgressing every time they did a sacrifice. The later commentaries bring support for the Rambam's opinion because the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion that holds that the Temple of Chonyo was not a place of idol worship, yet states that the priests who serve in the Temple of Chonyo are unfit to serve in the Temple of Yerushalayim. So if they're just doing it for Gentiles, why couldn't they serve in the Temple of Jerusalem? So there's an opinion that discusses this and says, nevertheless, they shouldn't have done it. If the priests had not transgressed the prohibition of slaughtering offerings outside the temple, they would not have been rendered unfit to serve in the temple. Okay, so says the Marshal. When the rabbis heard that Chonyo goes and he's appointed high priest, he yields to his brother, he sets him up, he runs away, he opens up a house of worship in Alexandria, what do they say? He goes, imagine someone, Chonyo ran away from honor and he yielded for his brother, but he couldn't give it up. Even more so, someone who wants honor is never going to give it up. From here, the Gemara doesn't say about Reb Shimon ben Prachia, based on this. People don't know. You ask, well, what did Korach do what he did? Why do people fight for jobs that are of honor? What's the big deal? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Prachia. Shimon ben Prachia lived around that time, a little later. But if someone would have offered me to be Nazi, I need I'll tie him up and give him to the lions. You want me to be a Nazi? What kind of ridiculous idea is that? Now that I'm already Nazi, you want me to leave the job? I'll pour hot water on your head. So what do we see from here? That before you take the job, you don't want it. But once you get covered is one of the hardest things to let go of once you get it. And that's why we learned from this that Chonyo wasn't able to do it. If you have 8 minutes, quickly, I'm going to go to the Gemara. What does it have to do with a Megillah? So there's a Mishnah that talks about the house of Shiloh, the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishkan that was in Shiloh, which was there, and the Beis Hamikdash that was in the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. So the question is in the Mishnah basically is if there's if after Shiloh was destroyed, all the sanctity of Shiloh was gone, and therefore all the restrictions that Shiloh could have caused on people sacrificing bamas was there was a heter. It was permitted. Once Shiloh was destroyed in the time of Eli, then everyone could have bamas in their backyard. But Kedushas Yerushalayim, the Mishnah says, Kedushas Yerushalayim ein achra heter. Once Jerusalem was sanctified, there's no such thing as sacrificing outside Jerusalem. Okay. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said something like this. Shemaiti, I heard Shemakrivim bebeis Chonyo b'zman hazeh, that one is allowed to sacrifice in the house of Chonyo today. Means if the house of Chonyo was still standing today in Alexandria of Egypt, and you wanted to do korban pesach, like not korban pesach, but if you wanted to do a neder, a neder or nedava, you wanted to do a bull to God, you can. So says Rabbi Yitzchak. I heard so. Because he's in the opinion like Rabbi Yehuda that the house of Chonyo is not a house of idol worship, and therefore, and there's no more kedusha after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. So now that the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, had Chonyo still been standing, and it did stand after the temple, you could sacrifice it. Because when they sanctified the temple, they sanctified it only for the time, but they didn't sanctify it forever. And therefore, once Jerusalem was destroyed, there's no more significance to Jerusalem, and therefore you could sacrifice in Egypt to sacrifice for God. So says Rabbi Yisrael.
That's only if you're holding by Rabbi Yehuda.
That's only if you're holding. No, in theory, that would apply that would apply anywhere. It just wouldn't apply to Beis Chonyo because if Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rameir, Beis Chonyo is a house of avodah zarah. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, yes, that's a house of worship for God. You're allowed to sacrifice there according to Rabbi Yitzchak. After the destruction of the temple, because Jerusalem is no longer significant. It's a big deal, by the way.
It's a gigantic deal. I thought wait a second. Yeah. I mean, I'm not in the business like you guys. I thought that after, or I forget which Navi was it, Amos. That was the end of all that it was totally a sewer. So I don't get it.
Okay, the Gemara is going to refute it, this opinion. The Gemara says, but he brings a proof. How does he know this? Because it says Kilei Basim Ad Ata
Ezra, right?
Ezra, yeah. Kilei Basim Ad Ata El Menucha V'Machla, because the Torah says that we didn't come to my resting place. Menucha and is Shiloh, Nachla is Jerusalem. Makish Nachla Menucha, Ma Menucha Yesh Achra. Just like Shiloh, once it was destroyed, everyone agrees you were able to. There was no more significance to Shiloh, and you're able to sacrifice anywhere. Af Nachla Yesh Achra Heter. Also after Jerusalem. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak. Now, you have to remember something, Ronnie. Where did the Jews start doing the sacrifices?
When?
What's the first communal sacrifice done by the Jewish people?
Probably in Shiloh, or I don't know, one of these places.
In Egypt, the Korban Pesach.
Okay.
Right. The year we left Egypt.
But did they have did they erect the tents?
No. Say everyone did the first Korban Pesach, right? You open the Chumash Shmois. In Parshas Boy, God says, everyone take a sheep, put it by your bed. What do you do with it? 4 days, and you slaughter the Korban Pesach. The first Korban Pesach was done in Egypt. Where are the rest of the Korbanos done for the next 40 years? In the desert. That's also not Israel.
I asked my son why all the animals in the desert, if they were just eating man.
Yeah.
He said the animals in the desert were used for korbanos.
The Korbanos.
That's what the sheep and the goats and the cows are for korbanos in the desert.
So they did Korbanos, but they didn't do it in Jerusalem.
That's the amazing amount of it.
Yeah. What happens when they come to Yerushalayim? The Shiloh is set up. Boom, you can't do it anymore outside. But once Shiloh is destroyed, you can go back to doing it in Egypt then, or doing it in the desert. And so Rabbi Yitzchak says same thing applies to the temple. So they say, these lady said, Amar, did you say that? They asked Rabbi Yitzchak, did you really say that? Is that what he said? That you could sacrifice in the house of Chonyo after the destruction of the temple? So he backed down and said, no. So he took back his statement, and he said, Rabbi Yitzchak said, no, you're right. I don't agree. That's the law. And Rava says, no, Elikim, he said, I swear to God, Amar, he said it, I heard him say it. Means I heard that, I learned from him, not I heard, but I heard that he said that it wasn't like he never said it. He did say it, but he went back on it, what he said. Why? The Gemara just finished it off. Mishum Kasha the Rav Mori. The Moise of Rav Mori, Rav Mori asked the question, Kedusha Shila Yesh Achar Heter, Kedusha Shlam En Achar Heter. Moitanan, Mishabah Yerushalayim, Nesra B'Mois. He said, what do you mean? You can't learn the pasuk that way. Everyone agrees that once the temple was born, like Ronnie said, everyone knows, once the temple was built, there's no more sacrificing outside the temple. And not only that, once the temple was built, you can't even have the bamais. Even the private altars that were permitted before that were prohibited. And that's what it means in Nachla. The reason why Yerushalayim is called Nachla and Shiloh is called Menucha, resting place versus inheritance. Inheritance means it's set. And that's what it was set for, that the Jewish people could never, that's why Jerusalem till today is holy. And therefore the Gemara continues, I'm going to stop here, the Gemara continues that from this reason, when the Jews, we have to remember something else. The Jewish people came back to the second temple. The second temple was not built right away.
What does it mean that Jerusalem is holy? Just curious, when you said it, what you meant by it?
There's a higher level of the Shekhinah. It's God's place.
Was the Rebbe always says that, but it's the whole country, I thought.
There's different levels. There's 10 levels of Kedusha.
Okay.
There's Eretz Yisrael. And by the way, it's a very good question you're asking. Because the question is that there's a lot, what we just learned now, we learned it fast, but there's a lot of commentaries on this question. What's the question? The question is, if there's ever an opinion that Jerusalem lost its sanctity, or because there's the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael and there's the Kedusha of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim only came holy when? 300 years after they conquered the land. Only David HaMelech conquered Jerusalem. Until David HaMelech, they didn't conquer Jerusalem. The time of the judges, Jerusalem was not a significant place, at least not significant in the way that we know it today, because only David HaMelech conquered it. It belonged to the Yevusim. Only in David HaMelech's time did we conquer Jerusalem. David HaMelech, and specifically Shlomo, sanctified Yerushalayim. The question is, that sanctification is the machlekes. That sanctification was good enough, or Ezra sanctified it again. But we know one thing for sure. We know that the prophets had to come in, that even though they put up a Mizbeach, 24 years or so, 24, 26 years before they built the second temple, because the Jewish people started to come. We have a few times the Jewish people came. There's a few aliyahs, right? There's an aliyah of Zerubbabel, and then later with Nehemiah and Ezra. The first aliyah in the second temple, with time of Koresh, which is before the story of Purim. They don't build a temple. They try to start building Jerusalem. It's all, the whole system, the whole idea collapses. But they put up the Mizbeach and they sacrifice there. And they had to have the prophets, the later prophets, Malachi and Haggai, had to come and say, this is exactly where Shlomo Melech had his Mizbeach. They needed to know exactly to the inch of where to put up the Mizbeach, otherwise they couldn't sacrifice. So we know clearly that even though Rabbi Yitzchak is the opinion that after the temple was destroyed, there's no longer Kedusha, but that's a minority opinion. Even though he has, the Gemara continues, he has a basis for that opinion, but he goes back on his statement. But we see, hypothetically, there's an idea that's floating out there. It's a minority opinion. It's not, he goes back on his opinion, but there's an idea that one could sacrifice today, anywhere sacrifice.
Yeah, but there's an issue, like even on the Harbai, people talk about the Arabs put all those trees there, so we wouldn't be able to do a karbonis because you can't do a karbonis
With Asherah.
Yeah.
Big trees. I didn't know that. I didn't hear that yet.
It's not allowed to be any trees, and the whole thing. It's not allowed to forbidden to have trees on.
You can't do a karbonis when there's
You can't do that. The halachic to this day, the Arabs put them
they
in.
put them there just
And we
to
have
block
a
it.
temple again, immediately everyone
Immediately,
the streets is coming
yeah.
out. There's no,
Even
you look
before.
at pictures from religious pictures, you see that the temple is there, there's not a single tree anyway.
What do you mean religious pictures? Drawings or?
Yeah, well,
Oh, yeah, sure.
people